Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following. Minister Paper number 16, Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Denham Town Community Zone, Social Interventions, April 9, 2020. The Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Mount Salem Community Zone, Social Interventions, September 1, 2017 to April 9, 2020. Annual Report of the National Council on Education, Tourism Workers Pension Scheme Regulations 2020 and Tourism Workers Pension Schemes Regulations 2020 Resolution. Annual Report and Audited Financial Statements of the Housing Agency of Jamaica Limited for the year 2017-2018. The Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Denham Town Community Zone, Extension of Period of Operation Number 2, Order 2020 Resolution. The Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Denham Town Community Zone, Extension of Period of Operation Number 2, Order 2020. Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security, and
Ms. Curtis, you want to just assist? Ms. Curtis, just take the microphone across. Thank you, Mrs. Cook. Thank you, Ms. Curtis.
The Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Mount Salem Community and Environs in the Parish of St. James Zone, Extension of Period of Operation Number 2, Order 2020. The Emergency Powers Number 2, 2019, Continuance Number 2, Resolution 2020. The Emergency Powers Continuance Number 2, Resolution 2020. The Emergency Powers Number 3, 2019, Continuance Number 2, Resolution 2020. And the Emergency Powers 2019, Continuance Number 2, Resolution 2020.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives. Petitions, papers, reports from committees. As I indicated, I'm going to ask this Honourable Senate to allow me to recommit reports from committees, and it's Senator Morris who will take the report. I'm sorry, Senator Scott Motley will take the report on behalf of the committee. Notices of motions given orally. Questions and answers. Minister, sorry, I'm sorry.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the following 5 motions. The Emergency Powers 2019 Continuance Number 2 Resolution 2020 under the Emergency Powers Act. The Emergency Powers Number 2 2019 Continuance Number 2 Resolution 2020 under the Emergency Powers Act. The Emergency Powers Number 3 2019 Continuance Number 2 Resolution 2020 under the Emergency Powers Act. The Emergency Powers Continuance Number 2 Resolution 2020 under the Emergency Powers Act, and the Tourism Workers Pension Scheme Regulations 2020 Resolution. Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for this. Oh, okay, sorry. I think I was distracted. It's okay. Let me read these first. The Emergency Powers 2019 Continuance Number 2 Resolution 2020. Whereas by virtue of Section 20, subsection 1 and 2b of the Constitution of Jamaica, the Governor General may make a proclamation declaring that a state of public emergency exists if satisfied that action has been taken or is immediately threatened by any person or body of persons of such a nature and on so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety. And whereas the Governor General was satisfied that a state of public emergency existed as a result of the aforementioned circumstances, and whereas on the 30th day of April 2019, the Governor General by proclamation declared that a state of public emergency exists in the entire area comprising the parishes of St. James, Hanover, and Westmoreland, and further declare that the said proclamation shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all members of each House. And whereas it is provided by Section 20, subsection 3 of the Constitution of Jamaica, that a proclamation made by the Governor-General for the purposes of and in accordance with that section shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas, under the provision of Section 3, subsection 1 of the Emergency Powers Act, it is lawful for the Governor-General during a state of public emergency, by order, to make regulations for securing the essentials of life to the community, and whereas the Governor-General, in exercise of the powers conferred upon him by Section 3, subsection 1 of the Emergency Powers Act, made the Emergency Powers Regulations 2019 for securing the essentials of life to the entire area comprising the parishes of St. James, Hanover, and Westmoreland during the state of public emergency. And whereas Section 3, subsection 4 of the Emergency Powers Act provides that any regulations so made shall be laid before the Senate and House of Representatives as soon as may be after they are made, and shall not continue in force after the expiration of 7 days from the time they are so laid before the Senate and the House of Representatives, whichever shall be the later, unless a resolution is passed by the Senate and House of Representatives providing for the continuance thereof. And whereas the Emergency Powers Regulations 2019 were laid in the Senate on the 3rd day of May 2019 and in the House of Representatives on the 7th day of May 2019, and whereas it was resolved by both Houses of Parliament that the state of public emergency as aforementioned remain and continue in force until the 25th day of April 2020, and whereas it is desirable that A, the state of public emergency declared as aforementioned remain and continue in force for a further period of 90 days until the 25th day of July 2020, and B, the Emergency Powers Regulations 2019 continue in force until the expiration of the state of public emergency. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this Honourable House, by this Honourable House, as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Emergency Powers 2019 Continuance Number 2 Resolution 2020. The state of public emergency declared by the Governor-General by proclamation on the 30th day of April 2019 shall remain in force for a further period of 90 days until the 25th day of July 2020. And 3, the Emergency Powers Regulations 2019 are hereby continued in force until the 25th day of July 2020. The Emergency Powers Number 2 2019 Continuance Number 2 Resolution 2020. Whereas by virtue of Section 20, subsection 1 and subsection 2b of the Constitution of Jamaica, the Governor-General may make a proclamation declaring that a state of public emergency exists if satisfied that an action has been taken or is immediately threatened by any person or body of persons of such a nature and on so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety. And whereas the Governor-General was satisfied that a state of public emergency existed as a result of the aforementioned circumstances, and whereas on the 7th day of July 2019, the Governor-General by proclamation declared that a state of public emergency exists within parts of the parish of St. Andrew as specified in the schedule to the proclamation, and hereinafter referred to as a specified community, and further declared that the said proclamation shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas it is provided by Section 20, subsection 3 of the Constitution of Jamaica, that a proclamation made by the Governor-General for the purposes of and in accordance with that section shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas, under the provisions of Section 3, subsection 1 of the Emergency Powers Act, it is lawful for the Governor General during a state of public emergency, by order, to make regulations for the securing of the essentials of life to the community. And whereas the Governor General, in exercise of the powers conferred upon him by Section 3, subsection 1 of the Emergency Powers Act, made the Emergency Powers Number 2 Regulations 2019 for securing the essentials of life to the specified community during the state of public emergency. And whereas Section 3, subsection 4 of the Emergency Powers Act provides that any regulations so made shall be laid before the Senate and House of Representatives as soon as may be after they are made, and shall not continue in force after the expiration of 7 days from the time they are so laid before the Senate and the House of Representatives, whichever shall be the later, unless a resolution is passed by the Senate and House of Representatives providing for the continuance thereof. And whereas the Emergency Powers Number 2 Regulations 2019 were laid in the Senate on the 12th day of July 2019 and in the House of Representatives on the 16th day of July 2019, and whereas it was resolved by both Houses of Parliament that the state of public emergency as aforementioned remain and continue in force until the 25th day of April 2020, and whereas it is desirable that A, the state of public emergency declared as aforementioned remain and continue in force for a further period of 90 days until the 25th day of July 2020, and B, the Emergency Powers Number 2 Regulations 2019 continue in force until the expiration of the state of public emergency. Now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Emergency Powers Number 2, 2019, Continuance Number 2 Resolution 2020. 2. The state of public emergency declared by the Governor General by proclamation on the 7th day of July 2019 shall remain in force for a further period of 90 days until the 25th day of July 2020. And 3. The Emergency Powers Number 2 Regulations 2019 are hereby continued in force until the 25th day of July 2020. The Emergency Powers Number 3, 2019, Continuance Number 2 Resolution 2020. Whereas, by virtue of Section 20, subsections 1 and 2b of the Constitution of Jamaica, the Governor General may make a proclamation declaring that a state of public emergency exists if satisfied that action has been taken or is immediately taken or is immediately threatened by any person or body or persons of such a nature and on so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety. And whereas the Governor General was satisfied that a state of public emergency existed as a result of the aforementioned circumstances, and whereas on the 5th day of September 2019, the Governor General by proclamation declared that a state of public emergency exists in the entire area comprising the parishes of Clarendon and St. Catherine, and further declared that the said proclamation shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period, not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas it is provided by Section 20, subsection 3 of the Constitution of Jamaica that a proclamation made by the Governor General for the purposes of and in accordance with that section shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period, not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas, under the provisions of Section 3, subsection 1 of the Emergency Powers Act, it is lawful for the Governor General during a state of public emergency, by order, to make regulations for securing the essentials of life to the community. And whereas the Governor General, in exercise of the powers conferred upon him by Section 3, subsection 1 of the Emergency Powers Act, made the Emergency Powers Number 3 Regulation 2019 for securing the essentials of life to the entire area comprising the parishes of Clarendon and St. Catherine during the state of public emergency. And whereas Section 3, subsection 4 of the Emergency Powers Act provides that any regulations so made shall be laid before the Senate and the House of Representatives as soon as may be after they are made, and shall not continue in force after the expiration of 7 days from the time they are so laid before the Senate and the House of Representatives, whichever shall be the later, unless a resolution is passed by the Senate and House of Representatives providing for the continuance thereof. And whereas the Emergency Powers Number 3 Regulations 2019 were laid in the House of Representatives on the 10th day of September 2019 and in the Senate on the 13th day of September 2019, thank you. And whereas it was resolved by both Houses of Parliament that the state of public emergency as aforementioned remain and continue in force until the 25th day of April 2020, and whereas it is desirable that A, the state of public emergency declared as aforementioned remain and continue in force for a further period of 90 days until the 25th day of July 20, and B, the Emergency Powers Number 3 Regulations 2019 continue in force until the expiration of the state of public emergency. Now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Emergency Powers Number 3 2019 Continuance Number 2 Resolution 2020. 2. The state of public emergency declared by the Governor-General by proclamation on the 5th day of September 2019 shall remain in force for a further period of 90 days until the 25th day of July 2020. And 3. The Emergency Powers Number 3 Regulations 2019 are hereby continued in force until the 25th day of July 2020. The Emergency Powers Continuance Number 2 Resolution 2020. Whereas, as by virtue of Section 20, subsections 1 and 2b of the Constitution of Jamaica, the Governor-General may make a proclamation declaring that a state of public emergency exists if satisfied that action has been taken or is immediately threatened by any person or body of persons of such a nature and on so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety. And whereas the Governor-General was satisfied that a state of public emergency existed as a result of the aforementioned circumstances, and whereas on the 26th day of January 2020, the Governor-General by proclamation declared that a state of public emergency exists within parts of the parishes of Kingston and St. Andrew, as specified in the schedule to the proclamation, and hereinafter referred to as the specified community, and further declared that the said proclamation shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period, not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas it is provided by Section 20, subsection 3 of the Constitution of Jamaica, that a proclamation made by the Governor-General for the purposes of and in accordance with that section shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period, not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas under the provisions of Section 3, subsection 1 of the Emergency Powers Act, it is lawful for the Governor-General during a state of public emergency, by order, to make regulations for securing the essentials of life to the community. And whereas the Governor-General, in exercise of the powers conferred upon him by Section 3, subsection 1 of the Emergency Powers Act, made the Emergency Powers Regulations 2020 for securing the essentials of life to the specified community during the state of public emergency. And whereas Section 3, subsection 4 of the Emergency Powers Act provides that any regulations so made shall be laid before the Senate and House of Representatives as soon as may be after they are made, and shall not continue in force after the expiration of 7 days from the time they are so laid before the Senate and the House of Representatives, whichever shall be the later, unless a resolution is passed by the Senate and House of Representatives providing for the continuance thereof. And whereas the Emergency Powers Regulations 2020 were laid before the House of Representatives on the 28th day of January 2020 and in the Senate on the 30th day of January 2020, and whereas it was resolved by both Houses of Parliament that the state of public emergency as aforementioned remain and continue in force until the 25th day of April 2020, and whereas it is desirable that A, the state of public emergency declared as aforementioned remain and continue in force for a further period of 3 months until the 25th day of July 2020, and B, the Emergency Powers Regulations 2020 continue in force until the expiration of the state of public emergency. Now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Emergency Powers Continuance Number 2 Resolution 2020. 2. The state of public emergency declared by the Governor-General by proclamation on the 26th day of January 2020 shall remain in force for a further period of 3 months until the 25th day of July 2020. And 3. The Emergency Powers Regulations 2020 are hereby continued in force until the 25th day of July 2020. The Tourism Workers' Pension Scheme Regulations 2020 Resolution. Whereas by virtue of Section 62, subsection 2A of the Tourism Workers' Pension Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, the Minister may, after consultation with the Board and the Commission, make regulations for the enrollment and registration of members. And whereas on the 30th day of March 2020, the Minister, after consultation with the Board and Commissioner, made the Tourism Worker Pension Scheme Regulations 2020. And whereas it is provided by Section 62, subsection 3 of the Act, that regulations made under Section 62, subsection 2 shall be subject to affirmative resolution. Now therefore be it resolved by the House of Representatives and Senate as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Tourism Workers Pension Scheme Regulations 2020 resolutions. And 2. The Tourism Workers Pension Scheme Regulations 2020, which were tabled in the Senate on the 24th day of April 2020, are hereby affirmed. Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will ask for suspension of standing orders to allow me to take the first 4 resolutions of which I've given notice. Yes.
Thank you very much, Minister. I'm just going to ask permission of this Honourable Senate just to deal with a matter that I neglected to do earlier during my opening comments. No doubt, members of the Senate would have heard of or actually know a former highly esteemed and much loved clerk of this House, Mr. Headley Deans, who served as the clerk from 1978 to 1994, and I believe would have been on the staff of the House for many years prior. Well, as you can imagine, Mr. Headley Deans is getting on in years, and it remains in relatively good health, I am informed. Unfortunately, however, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, he lost his wife, Joyce, and as you can imagine, it was a tremendous blow to him and the family, particularly since during this time of COVID, they were unable to go through the rituals that we have all become so accustomed to. But I understand from his family members that he's doing fine. But I just wish to ask that you agree with me to require the clerk to write to Mr. Deans and his family on behalf of this Senate, indicating our condolences on the passing of Mrs. Deans. Thank you very much. Questions and answers to questions? Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice? Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate? Motions for leave to introduce bills? The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained? Public business. What I suggest that we do is that we debate the 4 motions together. The votes will be taken individually, however. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. That is certainly agreed. Allow me to also start today's public business by adding my voice to the thanks you have expressed to the staff of the Parliament for the efforts they've made to not only come out and ensure that the nation's business continues, but also that we are appropriately socially distanced from each other, and that we are therefore able to continue the business of the country while maintaining best health and safety practices. Mr. President, allow me also to add our sympathies and condolences to the family of Mr. Dean and their loved ones, and our support for the suggestion you have made for the clerk to write in this regard. This is a challenging time, and loss seems to have a heightened sensitivity at this time. In this context, Mr. President, I will also note and express my condolences to the family of the 4-year-old who we were advised very late last night or very early this morning, who died at the Cornwall Regional Hospital as a result of the COVID-19 disease. Indeed, the sadness of losing one so young, we know that the name is being withheld out of sensitivity to the family, and that we believe is entirely appropriate. And but we nonetheless express our sympathies, our prayers for strength, and our condolences to the family and loved ones of the most recent victim of this lethal disease. Mr. President, having placed before the Senate 4 resolutions which seek to extend states of public emergency approved in that other place on Tuesday, and in the context of this most recent announcement, we proceed today in the unavoidable context of the COVID-19 pandemic affecting our country and the global community. It has been just over a month since our first positive case was confirmed, and in that short space of time, it's safe to say that we all feel like it's been a lifetime, and we all feel very much personally and around us that every aspect of Jamaican life has been touched. The circumstances which we face are as novel as the virus itself, and as situations have evolved, the government has responded reasonably, proportionately, and in a similarly evolutionary manner in a way to meet them. And this has included measures and restrictions issued under the Disaster Risk Management Act. Mr. President, if we exclude the impact of the cluster of cases at a particular BPO, which now stands at 140, comprising more than one half of our positive cases, these measures have largely been effective even as we work through challenges. For this, Mr. President, we thank technical advisors, we thank health workers, we thank security forces, our private sector, our partners, local and international, and mostly each and every Jamaican who has done his or her part in his or her space to cooperate and comply with new measures, or indeed to perform the tasks and work required to preserve the health and safety of our nation. I also thank our Prime Minister, the Most Honourable Andrew Holness, for his leadership in these challenging times, as well as that of Minister Tufton, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Health, Chief Medical Officer, and other members of the Ministry of the Health team. And of course, I take privilege as Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade to thank my Permanent Secretary and my team at home and abroad, in particular the consular team, which has been working overtime, literally, to address issues which arise. Mr. President, we have had to and will have to continue to adjust to changing circumstances, ensuring an appropriate focus where immediate action is needed, while keeping one eye on the future and life after COVID. In this context, law enforcement and public order remain critical even as we implement public health measures to contain the spread of the disease. Criminals and their connections remain intent on creating harm and violence in our society, and some have even exploited the crisis to continue their criminal activities. Mr. President, the Prime Minister, and indeed other members of the government, and I have been hearing it more in the public domain, have been saying for some time that violence in Jamaica needs to be seen and treated as a public health issue. And that like a disease, its spread needs to be halted in some cases by restricting movement and enhancing enforcement measures. It is not difficult to see some of the parallels. Mr. President, if we compare the crime statistics for the calendar year, and more particularly the period 1st of January 2020 to the 15th of April, that's just the last week, with the corresponding period in 2019, all serious crimes in Jamaica recorded decreases, and I will list as follows. There have been reductions in murders and shootings by 0.5% and 9.3%, respectively. Robberies are down by 15.9%, break-ins are down by 20%, rape is down by 36.2%, and larceny is down by 54%. Mr. President, while it can be reasonably assessed that the additional measures to curtail the spread of the novel coronavirus may be having an impact on the rate of crime, it is also equally recognized that at the time of the first positive corona case on the 10th of March 2020, we had also experienced a downward trend, or we were experiencing a downward trend in the murder figures. So even if we debate causality and proportion, Mr. President, in terms of how much is attributable to the disease versus how much is attributable to work underway, the need for continuation of the state of emergency before us can clearly be seen. Even in countries where crime rates have fallen precipitously as one of the impacts of the virus, Mr. President, Jamaica's overall rate reduction has been far less. And I take this, Mr. President, as a signal that we still have quite some ways to go in this fight against violent crime. The new COVID-19 measures have mutually reinforced the current efforts under the states of public emergency. And we believe that the value of these measures, as assessed by the security forces, is clear in the context of this national crisis. So, Mr. President, acting on the advice of the security forces and pursuant to the resolutions tabled today for approval and affirmation in this Senate, we ask that the 4 current states of public emergency remain and continue in force for a further period of 90 days from their date of expiration tomorrow until the 25th day of July 2020. As we have done on prior occasions, Mr. President, I'm proposing that we review the results in each declared area, comparing the period for which each has been in effect and the corresponding period immediately before. Starting with the East Kingston Police Division, the Kingston East Police Division, which was declared from the 26th of January 2020, and comparing, so from that date to the 15th of April, which is an 81-day period, to the immediately preceding 6th of November 2019 to the 25th of January, that division experienced an overall reduction in murders by 89%, Mr. President, and shootings by 91%. For the same period, there was an overall reduction in all Category 1 crimes during the state of emergency, again comparatively, by 72%. As at the 16th of April, under the state of public emergency, again comparatively, Mr. President, the police division has detained a total of 592 persons, of which 582 were released and 10 remain in custody. Mr. President, in respect of the by-parishes, the state of public emergency in the by-parish of Clarendon and St. Catherine, which was declared on the 5th of September, and reviewing the period between that date and the 15th of April, as against the immediately preceding period, that area collectively experienced an overall reduction in murders and shootings by 30%, Mr. President, and 36% respectively. There was also an overall reduction in Category 1 crimes by 22%. Mr. President, pardon me, each police division has also recorded similar reductions. In the police division of Clarendon, murders have reduced by 45% and shootings by 57%. In the police division of St. Catherine South, murders have reduced by 33% and shootings by 35%. In the police division of St. Catherine North, murders have reduced marginally by 3% and shootings by 17%. But Mr. President, you may recall that there was a previous state of public emergency in the St. Catherine North Police Division from the 18th of March to the 2nd of January 2019, and accordingly, the lower levels of crime reduction for St. Catherine North relative to Clarendon and St. Catherine South should be viewed in this context, as there was already significant progress in crime reduction through the prior state of public emergency. So your comparative base was in fact different. Mr. President, additionally, under the state of emergency in these divisions, the police have collectively detained a total of 4,137 persons, of which 4,107 were released, such that 30 detainees remain in custody. Mr. President, enhanced curfew measures were imposed in the parish of St. Catherine on Wednesday, April 15th, 2020, by order under the Disaster Risk Management Act, after there was a spike in COVID-19 cases, largely emanating from a BPO located in Portmore. We continue to encourage members of the affected communities to comply with the provisions of the order, and again, to continue to stay home and stay safe as possible. Mr. President, in respect of the state of public emergency in St. Andrews South, which was declared on July 7th, 2019, comparing the period from that date to the 15th of April 2020 as against the immediately preceding period of the 26th of September to the 6th of July, the St. Andrews South Police Division experienced an overall reduction in murders by 7% and shootings by 16%. For the same period, Mr. President, there was an overall reduction of Category 1 crimes by 3%. In the police division, a total of 2,091 persons were detained, of which 2,011 were released and 80, Mr. President, remain in custody. Mr. President, in the tri-parishes of Hanover, St. James, and Westmoreland, where the state of public emergency was declared on the 30th of April 2019, comparing the period from that date to the 15th of April to the preceding period of the 13th of May to the 29th of April 2019, that area experienced an overall reduction in murders by 25% and shootings by 28%. It's also noteworthy to report that for the same period, overall reductions were experienced in Category 1 crimes by 17%. Each police division recorded similar reductions during the state of public emergency, again comparing the same periods. In the police division of Hanover, murders reduced by 51% and shootings by 74%. In the police division of Westmoreland, murders have reduced by 46% and shootings by 35%. St. James had a marginal increase of 8% and 1% of murders and shootings, respectively. And as at the 16th of April 2020, that tri-parish police divisions collectively detained a total of 3,275 persons, of which 3,187 were released. 88 detainees, Mr. President, remain in custody. Mr. President, we note that St. James has had its own historical and unique challenges over the year, and while we recognize that the crime rate is still not where we would want to be or want it to be, a comparison of the current period under the state of public emergency with the previous one, that is the one that was declared in 2018, 18th of January 2018 to the 31st of January 2019, indicates that we have in fact managed to recoup some of the successes of the previous state of emergency by decreasing the level of violent crime that these areas were experiencing prior to the introduction of the first state of emergency. It would surprise you, Mr. President, perhaps to know that despite the small increase statistically, the murder rate in St. James is at the lowest that it has been for 17 years. Mr. President, these reductions are what was expected that the states of emergency would start to achieve as they mature. Communities start to feel more protected and engage the police with more information on weapons and criminals, such that progress is made. Mr. President, what the security forces have reported is that these measures have also created the space in which the police can develop better relations with some of the more violent communities. Also, through increased mobility and use of CCTV, investigations in this space have also led to some quick responses and apprehensions. And I call up the example in a recent incident on the 23rd of March, where a quick response team led the apprehension of 2 men in the space of 15 minutes following a murder and shooting on the Jimmy Cliff Boulevard in the parish. Mr. President, the state of public emergency in this space has allowed the security forces to de-escalate quickly what could have and what would otherwise have resulted in a bloodbath in the parish. Mr. President, national security is critical to everything that we do. A foundation of security is key to our success as a nation. Now that we are facing unprecedented times, this is even more clear. In the areas identified by the resolutions, there are indeed circumstances which subsist, which threaten public safety, and which justify the extension of the states of emergency. We cannot afford to let our guard down, and with the additional demands being placed on the security forces in their support of the COVID-19 disease measures, we have to ensure that they are given the support and the tools they require to continue the security agenda. Mr. President, the states of public emergency have thus far proven their value, although more work remains. And the crime statistics reflect that if it had not been for these measures, murders would have been projected to be much higher than what they are to date. So, Mr. President, even as I appeal to everyone to play their part as responsible citizens to unite and put an end to the pandemic of COVID-19, insofar as we have control over our own behavior, Mr. President, I also call on us all to unite and put an end to the scourge of violent crime that threatens our very existence. Similar to our national efforts to flatten the curve of the COVID-19 disease, we must not let up on our efforts to flatten the curve of violence which has threatened us all. In this context, Mr. President, I commend the resolutions for consideration and debate of this Honourable Senate and ask that they be approved. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Who is that there? Oh, Senator Brown. Thank you, Minister. Senator Brown.
Mr. President.
Please, 1 minute, Senator Brown. You need the lectern? You...
I just move the chair. No, man. Strong. Mr. President, let me, on behalf of the opposition, join with yourself and the leader of government business in extending our sympathy to the Dean family. Sadly, somebody I've interacted with for many, many years, and I wish him strength in this moment of bereavement. I wish also, Mr. President, to pay a tribute to all those who have died from COVID-19 in our country. Minister, I join you in the difficulty we have had in recognizing that a 4-year-old has succumbed to this coronavirus. The myth was that young people would not be affected, or young people could resist it. And this is a lesson for all of us, those like myself with multiple comorbidity, those of us in age. That is not just for the elderly that COVID-19 comes, but it comes for the young people. And I urge the young people of our country not to take risk, not to believe that somehow this will pass you and you shouldn't take it seriously. I join with the government and all well-thinking Jamaicans in saying, follow the social distance, the physical distance principle, and I commend the staff of the House for stretching us and separating us. Though I believe it was a conspiracy to separate Senator Skeffrey and myself. But it's working. It's working. It's working. It's working. It's working. It's working. But I therefore want to urge all of us in the country: social distancing, sanitation, and I've been enjoying staying at home. Tanayard? Yes, Kev, I've been enjoying it. And try and find a way to do useful work. Senator Gale, I've been able to conclude a wage negotiation on the phone. And you and I know we have been engaged in virtual meetings to deal with layoffs and the potential of layoffs in a backside area. So with technology, we can do things from home, just as the resolution we're going to deal with later about the committee meeting. And I am saddened that there are some Luddites who believe that the House can't meet virtually and report virtually. But Luddites are always around. We couldn't recognize you this morning, so cool. Mr. President, I could not allow this meeting to pass of the Senate without enjoying the support of Senator Gale in recognizing how workers are essential. Oftentimes, Senator Gale, through you, Mr. President, there are workers who we miss and think they are unimportant. But now we appreciate them very much. Sometimes they quarrel with us that they don't hear us speak about them. The garbage collectors, the garbage truck drivers. They're worth more than an envelope at Christmas. They're worth our love, our respect every day. Not many persons are aware, President, that the firefighters have agreed internally to work 24-hour shifts to ease the pressure and move. And that's their response. And Senator Samuda knows that I'm opposed to the 16-hour. But there are correctional officers who are working 16 hours every day to facilitate a reduction in movement and to cover for people who are working. So there's a way in which we miss the grocery worker, the supermarket worker. And we see the police and we hear the police, even though we believe they should get more protective devices. I passed through a checkpoint this morning and I wouldn't be satisfied with what I saw them with. And Minister, I know you will look at that. All the workers in this Parliament building. And we saw, President, the danger of sick buildings. That where there's central here, it doesn't take many, Senator Webby, to be affected for that virus to spread and take down many. Abroad, we see meat packaging plants. Smithfield, the Tyson brands, where many workers are affected. And so, Senator Gale, our lifelong commitment to the workers of the country requires us to speak up. I look forward, whichever side of the fence we are on, to the next round of negotiations with these workers who are essential, Senator Webby. How do we tell the nurses, we can't do more for you? How do we tell the doctors, old strain? How do we tell the teachers with limited resources who must homeschool to old strain? This is part of the new normal we have to look at. How do we treat them? How do we treat them? Because it can't be that we say old strain forever. So they are doing their part, and I want to thank them from the bottom of my heart. And I thank them on all of us behalf for the wonderful work. And the fact that I haven't named some, it's not that we're leaving them out, but time is limited here. Mr. President, having said that, I come to these 4 motions on the basis that this Senate is a review chamber. And we take that seriously. That this Senate, all of us on both sides, when we were sworn in, took an oath to uphold the Constitution of Jamaica. And so my response and comment on these things is against the background of a review chamber member swearing to uphold the Constitution. These 4 resolutions also are being taken in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. The resolutions are all rooted under Section 20, subsection 1, and subsection 2B of the Constitution. There are different areas being covered. The opposition, the last time we discussed these resolutions, proposed and was accepted in the other place that instead of having different expiry dates of these resolutions, that we should have a common expiry date. That made sense. The government accepted, and it's clearly to our benefit. Otherwise, we'll have to be coming today, next week, the other week, to be passing resolutions. Can't be good. So the opposition suggestion was accepted, and it makes sense. The opposition wishes to make another proposal, that instead of continuing these 4 resolutions, on the basis of the first paragraph of each of the resolutions, which says, whereas by virtue of section 20 sub 1 and 2 and sub 2b of the Constitution of Jamaica, the Governor General make a proclamation declaring that a state of public emergency exists if satisfied that action has been taken or immediately threatened by the person or body or persons of such nature, and on so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety. Mr. President, 2 years now of state of emergency. We can't find this person, body of persons to deal with this crime issue. This is why we have always said that the state of emergency should be used in a way, not as a crime-fighting tool for in perpetuity, whether 5 or 7 years, but should be used to address the purpose it sets out in the resolution. And we told the government that the time would come when there will be a need for a real state of emergency, such as in the same section 20, but instead of 2B, 2C. Let me read what 2C says. 20 sub 2C says. It says that a period of public disaster has arisen as a result of the occurrence of an earthquake, hurricane, flood, fire, outbreak of pestilence, and here's a key one, outbreak of infectious disease or other calamity, whether similar to the foregoing or not. So the Constitution, the founding fathers, the founding fathers made it clear that the COVID pandemic we face ought to be addressed under the state of emergency and to provide cover for the government. So we are proposing that the use of the Disaster Management Act and the orders thereunder should be anchored under 22C of the Constitution, because it gives you enormous powers. And the current regulations we have speaks about quarantine, taking property, and it covers everything. Because the truth be told, despite the percentage announced by the minister, you still admit that we're still at 0.5% reduction over last year, which was a significant increase over previous years. So what we really need is a united front against the COVID-19. We propose to the government to use 20 subsection 2C of the Constitution. It can also allow you to fight crime. If you want to merge 2B and C, it's an option you have. But with a one central system. For example, I asked the House leader last night, this opposition leader, what about the regulations? Does the regulation still speak to gas station opening hours, bars opening hours, supermarket opening hours? Or does that synchronize with the new disaster management act orders? we are saying to you, move government to go under, to include 20 BC in any approach to a state of emergency of the Constitution, which is to say, dealing with infectious disease. To take that clause, and you have our full support for these. Because it then brings everything under one. Give your COVID efforts, which are also yielding success in crime, because it has restricted people. When you tell somebody you can't move from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. for the COVID fight, that removed them moving for crime as well. So go there is what we ask you. And this is not a new position. The leader of the opposition business in the Senate, he should have released, was it the 30th of March? Sometime earlier, making that call. We maintained that call, and the leader of the opposition, God bless him, he was out last week, also made a call in the other place. We urge the government to give serious consideration to using Section 22C of the Constitution to deal with these things. Give whatever you're doing the shield, the protection of the Constitution. We urge you so to do, and it is efficient, more efficient too. Mr. President, I fear in the absence of constitutional protection of our citizens, the philosophy of abridge, abrogate, and infringe will dominate against the best interests of the Jamaican people. Let me repeat it. The philosophy of abridge, abrogate, and infringe could be used against the best interests of the Jamaican people. It could erode our rights. And I want to make it clear that the freedom of movement, the freedom of speech, and the other freedom, religious freedom, provided under the Constitution are not niceties. They are not niceties. They are fundamental freedom that our forefathers fought for and defended in the Constitution. We must not play around with them. Mr. President, it can't be when one side is in, there's a respect for the Constitution, when the other side is out. A Toll Road Law Act was passed, and it was challenged as unconstitutional, all the way to the Privy Council. And now we see the benefit of the toll roads, of course. But the reality is, we can't take constitutional rights on the basis of where you stand in the politics. Let me make it clear. I voted for the Disaster Risk Management Act. When I voted for that in 2014, I expect it would be a companion with a state of emergency under the Constitution. That it wouldn't just be utilized, but it would be used along with a state of emergency. So when the orders are given, they are given by the Prime Minister, but subject to parliamentary review as states of emergencies are. Right now, because some people have a difficulty with the niceties of the Constitution, the enormous power of the Prime Minister to make regulation orders without recourse to Parliament is a dangerous road which must be avoided. And it matters not who is the Prime Minister, whether it is Andrew Holness or Peter Phillips, whether it's Portia Simpson or Bruce Golding. As citizens of this country and as parliamentarians, we must consistent with our oath, uphold the Constitution of Jamaica. The powers of the Prime Minister to make laws under the Disaster Risk Management Act must be subject to parliamentary review. And let me tell you why that is important, Mr. President. The Prime Minister has taken a decision that he has the right to make these orders, but he will come to Parliament and tell Parliament what he's doing. Ask them their views. But think about this, Mr. President. Would you tolerate, as a member of the Parliament, an order to impact the population of the country not being provided to you as a parliamentarian? It is only in the possession of the Prime Minister and the Attorney General, but not given to the parliamentarians to look at, to go through, to discuss, but is read and taken on the fly. It don't look right. And I propose that a different approach be adopted. We allow through the state of emergency mechanism of 22C, allow for parliamentary oversight. It's not going to affect the agility of the order maker. What it will stop, Mr. President, is what we saw recently. That lawyers who must perform fundamental duties under the constitutions, in the first 2 or so orders, were excluded from representing their client and time. Thankfully, somebody sounding like the President of the Senate made a statement, and things changed. Mr. President, let me thank you. Let me thank you. Had there been consultation with the legal fraternity, we could have avoided that. Let's take another one, Senator Webby. Journalists were being told, stay here. Don't come out. If you live in St. Catherine, which is where almost everybody lives, except those who live in, how you pronounce it, Mr. President? Upper St. Andrew? Yeah. It's Manchester, yes. Some come from Manchester, they still live there. Right? But again, we decided that journalists wouldn't come until the Press Association came out. And as I said, the President spoke, and adjustments have been made. So,
I think you are giving me a bit too much credit, Senator Brown.
I appreciate your humility. I appreciate your humility. I appreciate your humility. But the reality is your voice made a difference. Mr. President, had they consulted and brought it to Parliament, maybe it would have been seen early that mayors and councillors should be exempt along with parliamentarians and members of the House of Representatives. Yes, it has been corrected. But thank you. So, councils and things. And let me make a plea, Minister, both of you. In our political dynamics, and given the way we are in the term of the government, I believe caretakers should be added to the list of mayors and councillors who are exempt. Caretakers are on both sides and on the sides of those who are not in the Parliament. So, caretakers approved by registered political parties, registered with the ECJ, should be allowed similar exemption to councillors, to mayors. It's part of our democratic process, and they too should be able to reach out and to do things to help So, I want to make that suggestion to our caretakers. Mr. President, had there been more rigorous discussion in the Parliament, the debacle in St. Catherine on Saturday would have been avoided. I'm not here blaming anybody, you know. I just simply say, if you talk to the mayors, mayor in Portmore, mayor in St. Catherine, they understand the ground better. They have access to their councillors. They know what people are feeling out there. The debacle could have been avoided. I want to make another suggestion, Senator Matt Samuda. It's clear to me that our people live hand to mouth. Senator Webby, you'll understand this. Without Western Union, them dead for hungry. I'm going to make a proposal that for the next 2 weeks, we commit to the people that these remittance agencies be allowed to be open for 6 days each week. It's about trust. If I know I can get my money tomorrow, I'm not going to come and crowd up the place today, defeating Senator Samuda, the social distancing. It's about trust. And I believe right now that trust is missing. That trust is missing. So I make that proposal, and I hope, Senator Webby, it will find favor with you. Just tell the people, for the next 2 weeks, the money remittance agencies would be open for 6 days. I don't believe it is going to create a massive spread. We may have a more social distancing taking place because people don't feel that somehow I'm not going to get my money. And whether we like it or not, there are so many of our people who are not in the banking system. And bank is the word you use. Free them up, because cash is important right now. Not everybody have a card. Everybody need cash now. So let's do that. Mr. President, we should not exclude our citizens using the Disaster Risk Management Act alone. If there's a constitutional right for freedom of movement, and we're going to restrict that, let's provide the protection of the Constitution. I'm not going to quarrel whether a decision was taken in time. I'm simply saying the principle of excluding Jamaicans, contrary to the Constitution, must be rooted through the Constitution. The last time I spoke here, I said, we will support you if what you do is in accordance with the law, the Constitution. I propose that that be done. And again, I therefore say, Mr. President, let the orders under the Disaster Risk Management Act be affirmed by Parliament. I'm going to say one thing a little controversial. Mr. President, when a certain bill came for debate in the Senate, a bill which ended up with 260 odd amendments, there was a clause in that bill which said that the Prime Minister could by order change any law. I'm talking about the NITS bill. This opposition strenuously opposed that provision. Thankfully, the government said it was an error. All right, we accept that. But somehow the government has found in a bill passed by my side the similar provision, it will appear, where they can make order without coming to Parliament. I don't like it. But I believe when we passed that bill, it was to be a companion with the state of emergency provision of Section 22C of the Constitution. So I just simply say, Mr. President, I don't like it. I don't like it because it feeds into the abridge, abrogate, and infringe philosophy. It's a dangerous philosophy. Our founding fathers set us freedom, not restrictions. And when we give up these restrictions, we give up our right to be free. And we can't do it because the party in power favor us or disfavor us. We must stand with the Constitution always. Mr. President, I hope some new orders will be made. And I'm sorry the minister is not here, but there's confusion, for example. Just a few more. But if it's time, I'll sit and take the motion.
The Speaker's time has expired.
Mr. President, I ask that the Speaker be allowed the time to complete his presentation.
The question is that the Speaker be permitted time to complete his presentation. Those in favor? Against?
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. In this period of COVID, I want to propose some new emergency powers to be taken for consideration. But first, let me say, there's confusion, President, over whether Jamaicans are allowed to come back during this period up to 31st of May. I got a call yesterday from a backside worker in St. Anne, which asked me, is it true that his daughter who wants to come back can come back in? I said yes, because I read the order, clause 3(2), saying Jamaicans are exempt from the ban on everybody. It seems to me that the ambassador in Washington read it the same way, because she put out a release calling on people to contact the consulates. Clearly, the Minister of Foreign Affairs has put out a counter-release. Well, the terrible tout, writing in his tweet, said, it's not what the minister says, it's what the law says. If the order is the law, then they change the order and make it clear that you're not allowing people in now. But then how do you do that? You allow somebody from Turks and Caicos. You allow people from Antigua to come in. God need to make up his mind. Too frequently a chop and change in the orders. That doesn't go for confidence, Senator Samuda. Doesn't go for confidence. Here are the orders I wish to propose the Prime Minister consider and have approved by Parliament. Senator Gill, there are some pensioners, people who are retired. Submit, Chair President, their application for pension. Some 2-3 years ago. Some maybe even recently. But they are not getting it yet. But now they need every cent they can scrape. I've seen some of them sending around literally begging, can I get a care package? I want to urge the Minister of Finance and through him the Prime Minister, because we're talking about district constables, we're talking about teachers, postal workers, people in the public sector who have resigned. Where they have retired, make a payment to them of a percentage of the lump sum they would get. Pending the conclusion of the bureaucratic process to approve the pension. do not leave them out of pocket. I do not believe this is too big an order to make. The truth is, Senator Gale, the poverty thing has taken over. For these people, they know no prosperity. It is poverty and more poverty that is filling the land. So we need to make that a good faith move. Pay them some money now. That's an order I urge the government to make. Another order, Senator Gill, I seek your support on, is how do we treat the period of stay at home? Workers are asking, must my vacation leave be used? And we're talking about possible another month of this. Do I lose my vacation leave? Do I lose my sick leave? What happens if I'm quarantined? We need an order that addresses this issue. Senator Gill, I propose that the social partnership be the medium to discuss between the employers and the unions how to fit and resolve this issue so we can have an order where people feel if I follow the government and stay home, I will have some money coming in. We need to work on that. We also need to move, let me say it. Last time I spoke here, I said I really prefer to say a national approach with this emergency to the CODIF. I'd have liked to see the national partnership structure working, looking over these issues, discussing with the government, an inclusive approach. I said it was nice to have the Governor General speaking in a broadcast. It would have been good to see the leader of the opposition being provided with the resources to make a broadcast to the people as well. I've seen an advertisement which included the leader of the opposition. We need more of this bipartisan and inclusive approach to the fight against COVID and the continued fight against crime. Our side, the opposition, is committed to that. I want to see an order establishing a national task force to plan for the recovery. Because let us be clear, Senator Samula, I get no joy in seeing the devastation in the workplace. When I work at a little restaurant in St. Anne, I was getting 11,000 a week, and that place closed down. I'm not sure, because it makes no sense to keep opening to get the 4,500 a week or the 19 or the 18,000 a month that was promised. How are we going to deal with those workers? Senator Gill, when you drive through St. Anne's now and you look to the north and you see the hotels, for the first time you see shutters at the gate. No longer just a bar, but shutters. 300,000 people in tourism affected. The BPO will shed some, and I hope they can survive working in the context of social distancing. But Senator Samula, what we're facing as a country is greater poverty because of the COVID. I'm not blaming the government. We're just facing a reality. The United States have shown 26 million unemployed in the last couple of weeks. That means that we may be looking at as much as 20% reduction in remittances coming to Jamaica. In other words, let me not hear anybody talk about prosperity in this time. Let me not hear it. It is an aspiration. We must strive for it. But what we have to face now is the increased poverty that is facing our people. Be they the small farmer, the middle farmer, the big farmer. Be they the worker or the businessman. Minister, I promise you one thing. Open arms on the side of the opposition in helping to resolve this. We can't do it from outside. We can't do it from outside. The government has to be inclusive. One of the dangers of doing it the way you do it is that you are going to be blamed for all that has happened. Not that we want to share the blame, but we want to help you to find creative solution to take us forward. And that's what we come to. So today, Minister, I wanted to say I concur with much of what you said at the beginning of your speech. So we're not here in opposition. Every single one of us will vote. I think I'm talking dim, I'm talking out of turn. Every single one of us will vote for these resolutions. But we urge you to go beyond these resolutions and to include 20BC in the way we approach this. May it please you, Mr. President, may it please you. We come in cooperation. I hope you take what we said in that spirit.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Morris.
Thank you, Mr. President. No, man. I won't be. I think Senator Brown has made a comprehensive presentation on behalf of the opposition, and I just have a few things that I want to add in the discussion. And I want to say, Minister, you know, I have never been one in this chamber to arbitrarily support states of emergency, because for me, it is a very fundamental issue. And I cherish the fundamental rights and freedoms of our citizens that were fought for by our national heroes over the years. And so when I give my support to states of emergency, it has to be within a particular context. And I have sat long and hard, and I think I've intimated it to my very good friend, Minister Samuda, in a telephone discussion, that I would be prepared to support a national state of emergency in terms of the fight against this enemy of ours, COVID-19. Because, you see, I have seen what this is doing to other countries, and I don't want it to happen in Jamaica. Don't want it to happen in Jamaica. And I see up to last week, we were tracking extremely well, Mr. President, the cases of the coronavirus in Jamaica. And then just one contact in one institution, and the number of cases tripled in our country. And I see, again, Senator Sabuda, some people from communities, when the Prime Minister announced that they were going to lock down St. Catherine. Moved all over the island. They were in St. Elizabeth, they were in St. James, and they were in St. Anne. And I said to myself, I can't understand our Jamaican brothers and sisters. Because instead of heeding to the warning and try to contain the spread, they are moving all over the place to try and spread the virus. And when it happened and when I heard of it, I said to myself that this is one time that I am prepared to fulsomely support a state of emergency, because it is necessary and it would be within the context of what the Constitution anticipated states of emergency to be used for. So we are here, and the opposition has made its case, a case that I fulsomely agree with, and Senator Brown has spelled out the specifics of the case. But you know, there are some other things that I want to point out. Because whilst the states of emergency are in place, we're still seeing criminal activities taking place. And I am very concerned from the perspective of persons with disabilities, Madam Leader of Government Business. Because you know why? Earlier this year, one of our members went missing. And it's about 2 months now. 2 months now. And we haven't heard a word about Jasmine Dean. We haven't heard a word as to what is the latest with the investigation from the police. And we have heard that the police have taken into custody an individual about a month now. And if it is that they have taken in an individual for so long, under what basis would you be holding the individual for that long without charging the individual? Is there a law that I am not aware of that would allow you to hold the person for that length of time? But we need to get an update as to what is happening with the investigation. Where are we in terms of finding out where is Jasmine Dean? Mr. Dean and his children want to know where is their daughter. The disabled community wants to know where and what has happened with their colleague Jasmine Dean. And I've decided that I'm going to make the case in this debate today, because as I talk to my disabled colleagues, Senator Samuda, they say, some of them say that they get the feeling that the government don't care about them. That is how some of them feel, you know. And they echo that based on the experience with Jasmine, because they say we're not hearing nothing as to what happened with our colleague. And then they talk about what is happening with the COVID environment, where services or companies are being pushed to online services, utilizing the technology to drive their operations. But they are being excluded from it. And you would have seen on television last night where members of the disabled community who are blind and visually impaired are pleading to the government and the members of the Bankers Association of Jamaica to make sure that the services that are there at the automated teller machines, to make sure that they are accessible to blind and visually impaired persons. Because what is happening, and this is why I tell people that if we are going to have an inclusive society, we have to have dialogue and consultation with all the stakeholders, not some of the stakeholders. Because sometimes we talk, and when we talk, we don't anticipate or we don't understand the implications of the policy decisions that we are taking and making for other vulnerable and marginalized groups like persons with disabilities. So when I heard the Prime Minister in his budget, in his press briefing early this week, speaking about the need for us to embrace the online operation of banks as a part of the new norm, I said, yes, Mr. Prime Minister, but tell the banks them that they must make sure that the services are accessible to the disabled population. Because it can't be that you're moving forward, but in moving forward, you're isolating a significant block of your population. And one of the things that they do is that they are changing out, Senator Johnson Smith, they're changing out the ATM machines, and they are, you used to have keypads that a blind person could just press the buttons. But instead now, what they are doing is using touch screen. And on the screens, you just have the numbers written. The blind person now going to be able to see what is on the screen. So they are at a distinct disadvantage. And this is what we are, the members of the community of persons with disabilities who are blind have been talking about, and this is what they mentioned in the newscast last night. And they want to be heard. They want to be included. And I am saying, ministers, make sure that when you go to cabinet, make sure that you, in the discussions, that persons with disabilities are placed on the agenda, and are begging that this issue that was raised by my blind colleagues last night be brought to the fore, and that the banks heed to their cry and make their systems more accessible for blind individuals. And also wheelchair users too, because they have some little cubicles that they establish, and the wheelchair can't go inside the cubicles. And they build them in such a way that you don't have a little elevated ramp where the wheelchair can go inside the cubicles. They have a step instead. Right? So you have to make sure that all of these services are provided and they are inclusive for persons with disabilities. It's what we call in academia universal design, to make sure that whatsoever services that you are providing for the able-bodied, you take into consideration persons who are disabled. And that's all we are asking for, to make sure that our right to participate in the society is respected and that our services are provided. And I tell you, Madam Leader of Government Business, it's within that context that persons with disabilities believe and say that nobody not fighting for them, because even the other day when we were having the applications for the care program, no, I don't know if consideration was given to applicants with disabilities for the program. And I am making a subsequent appeal, because I don't know how many persons with disabilities who would have applied for it in light of the accessibility issues relating to some of the government websites. I am making up an appeal as well that the government has a facility, Senator Samuda, at the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities called the Economic Empowerment Grant. Every year provide $15 million to assist with assistive aids and also an economic empowerment grant. And I am making an appeal that that facility, an additional amount, if it's even $20 million, to be added to it so that more persons with disabilities can be brought into the loop at this particular point in time in terms of economic activities. You know, if the government is spending $5 billion on the care program, I am certain that it would not jolt the head of the Minister of Finance if he find that $20 million and say to the JCPD, we're giving you an additional $20 million this year for the Economic Empowerment Grant. And I am making that appeal to both ministers who I know have a conscience to take it back to the cabinet in order to fight on behalf of persons with disabilities. And so I make these appeals within the context of what I have heard from members of the community of persons with disabilities being said about Jasmine Dean, who has gone missing because of the nature of criminality in our society. And it is within this context that we are here today dealing with this extension of the states of emergency. But I want to make sure that whilst we are doing the extensions, whilst we are fighting the COVID pandemic, we make sure that persons with disabilities are brought in the loop and are given meaningful consideration. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Morris. And Senator Brown, I wasn't in the chamber when you completed your presentation. I thought it was one of your better presentations before the Senate. Thank you, Senator Morris. Senator Minister Johnson.
Well, Mr. President, I will say that it must be, and if memory fails, correct me, but it must be the first time that Senator Brown has faced me with literal open arms. I have to say that I do hope that it will bring the rain, which is much needed, Mr. President. But seriously, I certainly join, as you joined with my opening words through you, Mr. President. I, as Senator Brown supported my opening words, I too support his, where he spoke of the importance of appreciating workers. And indeed, at the last presentation, I tried my very best to enumerate, including all the levels of work that are often overlooked. So important, the people who keep places clean, who keep our communities and our homes clean, who keep our roads clean. You know, I go out in the morning sometimes when I'm blessed with the time to exercise, and the ladies are sweeping the dust to ensure that the asphalt is not eroded when it rains. And they're there with masks. Yes, 6 o'clock curfew has eliminated that. but the work is being done. And I noted in particular that you spoke not only about acknowledging the work, but respecting the people who do it. That is absolutely key, loving and respecting the people who are a part of society and often overlooked. So I want to just join with those words. I feel exactly the same way. And, you know, I mean, I was always brought up, you think, never but for the grace of God. You should always be grateful for the blessings that you have and never presume you did anything to deserve them. And so you must always respect, love, and support persons who may have less. This is it's a fundamental, and I think everyone, from childhood, we should be made to understand that. I want to also say that in respect of the proposal for the unification of dates of the states of emergency, certainly this has brought great efficiency to the program, and or rather to the process, and therefore I had not realized it was an opposition proposal, but it certainly made every form of sense and has been very helpful. So we're going well along the road of agreement. and Senator Brown, I have to wait for you to see Senator Brown. Indeed, I embrace the positive suggestion made, and I'm glad that we took it on board as well. On the matter of the state of emergency, the proposal for an all-island state of emergency, as is provided for under the Constitution. Mr. President, I don't propose to go into detail on that matter. I believe that the chief legal officer of the government or legal advisor of the government is best placed to make the detailed arguments on that matter, although that may be in another place. But what I will say is that the government did consider that issue and determined that the better approach, the more proportional approach for the process at the stages that we have experienced were appropriate for the use of the DRMA. And had this pandemic taken place before 2015, when there was no other approach, there was no alternative legal mechanism, perhaps that would have been automatically done. But as we are, and as we have assessed the matter, it was felt that the Disaster Risk Management Act of 2015 provided an appropriate mechanism. And where the shortfall regarding parliamentary oversight has been acknowledged, the effort has been made to close that gap by ensuring that the regulations are taken and discussed in Parliament before they are finally gazetted. The proclamations is made, but there is a discussion in Parliament, and and suggestions of the opposition have been taken on board. While that may not fit the perfection of a complete solution as you propose it, or why you may not agree with all elements of it, we understand that this is the opposition position. And what I will emphasize is that the government has said that were we to reach a stage where it was felt that an all-island state of emergency were necessary, then it would be called, and accordingly it is good to know that we will have your support if that day should come. Again, this is cooperation in its spirit and intent. There are different views under the law, but we do feel confident that the steps being taken are proportional, appropriate, and reasonable under the framework that was provided for under the DRMA. And while an option exists under the Constitution, and I understand that there are some technicalities as well, that guided us in this direction, that we feel that it is quite appropriate and constitutional, the actions which are being taken at this time. So should the day come, we're glad to know that we will have your support. On the matter of the most recent order, the DRMA Enforcement Measures Order 4, I understand when I was out you spoke to confusion regarding the meaning. And I must say it is regrettable. Regrettable. Thank you, Mr. President and Leader of Opposition Business in the Senate. It's regrettable that generally so much time has to be spent addressing misinformation and misunderstandings where they occur generally. Let me speak generally before this order. I think that on the matter of fake news and mischief making, and I'm not saying this was, perhaps mischief making, but not fake news. If you, Leader of Opposition Business, will back me up in saying that no lawyer, and I would certainly hope no legislator who has served in this parliament for any significant period of time should be at a stage of life where they believe that one line should be read on its own to understand the meaning of a law. The most basic rule of statutory interpretation is that a document must be taken as a whole. That is fundamental and across the board. And if you are a legislator who has served for any period of time, you should understand that. Even if, yes, but we understand that legal, yes, but the publishing of an order and then explaining it in a way which is incorrect is unhelpful. If you do not understand, then ask. But what was done, I think, really created more difficulties than were necessary. What I will say, and again, so I'm speaking in the general, that I am going to just use this opportunity right now. That if, on the specific matter, the Prime Minister will speak on Monday and will set out all of the details about the process. Because the process, we have done a lot of work on the end-to-end protocol, of which we have spoken on more than one occasion. We have had an opportunity that, I will call it an opportunity because the government of Antigua reached out to ask for landing authorization for a flight which they were sending, which they chartered to send for approximately 50 of their students who are here. And in agreeing to that, and in that process, we asked whether the just more than 20 Jamaicans who we knew were stranded in Antigua and Barbuda because they had been in touch with the Honorary Consul there and with the High Commission in Trinidad seeking assistance in different ways over the past 3 weeks. So we had a list of persons that we asked whether they could be accommodated on that flight coming in. And what we did, because of the timing, that request was just made a few days ago, is that we sought to use it as a pilot to test the new process which is in place. And what is excellent is that 17 of the 20 used the process absolutely seamlessly. There was a minor and an individual traveling with another person involved. And it has highlighted one or two matters which can be nailed down over the weekend. But fundamentally, the controlled reentry program will be spoken to clearly by the Prime Minister on Monday. And in the interim, however, it is just, I ask for persons' understanding in the context that we have been speaking about a controlled reentry program, that even if the structure of the order is not obvious to you and the order is printed as a legal framework, it is drafted by the technical persons, not the political directorate. It is drafted technically for its legal purpose. And the operationalization, which will be administrative and technological, that will require explanation, the context within which we approach it, the fact that it's taking place within the context of the highly infectious COVID-19 disease and all the other relevant laws. That is something which admittedly cannot be understood by reading one line or even just reading that paragraph. So I'm just asking the public, and I'm asking persons of influence to await the official information. And if they do not understand legal language, and I don't mean that with any sense of arrogance at all, I mean it in the sense of, if you've read it and you're not quite clear, and you're in an opportunity to seek some guidance, please seek it, because the anxiety that our people are experiencing is really quite acute. And as we move through the process, trying to share as much information as possible without creating a vacuum, but as there is a process, it's important that we all recognize our role in either supporting that or making it more difficult for persons. So I'm just using this opportunity to ask for a reasoned approach on these matters. Regarding the matter of the disabled community, in respect of the disabled community, I want to say to Senator Morris and to the community of persons living with disability who have expressed their concerns through him today, I want to also say to all Jamaicans who are concerned about this young lady who in her vulnerable state has clearly fallen into unfortunate circumstances, that we absolutely care about Jasmine Dean and every other young person who has fallen into criminal hands. We care and we are working. As far as I understand, the police continue in their investigations. I regret that we don't have an update for you today on that matter. What we can do is convey through Minister Samuda that there is a real need to hear something at this time. And I hope that in so doing I am not overstepping my lane, and that it is something that they can do without prejudicing the investigations which are underway. And I am hopeful that they're able to do so, because this is a particular case that has tugged at the heartstrings of so many of us. There's a vulnerability to the photos and a pain in the voice of her father, which I'm sure are reflected among so many families who have been victim to crime. But they touch us all. They touch us all. And I just want to assure Senator Morris that we will make an inquiry as to whether the police are in a position to give an update at this time, and if so, to request that they so do. It's important. On the matter of disabled access, we are making efforts as a government to be as inclusive as possible. You would know, Senator, that we have not only ensured that there is interpretation for the hearing impaired of every briefing on the coronavirus given by the Prime Minister, and that indeed all public information, public service information videos that have been created by the Office of the Prime Minister have words across the screen so that the hearing impaired are able to follow as well. But the broader point, I will. Yes, if you could allow me. If you could allow me. And I will use this to make the point to say that it's not everything that you say we were not thinking of before. But somehow, your indications are timed very effectively for your purpose. But I wanted to say, I wanted to finish my general point, but Antoinette at Tony Terp, I hope you're signing your name. We want to express our thanks to you. Absolutely. On behalf of every Jamaican who cares that everyone is able to access information and to understand how to protect ourselves and what is happening in the world around us, especially during a pandemic when fears and anxieties are so heightened. We thank you for all the work you're doing. It's incredible every day, and we don't know how you don't get tired. So, on the matter of broader issue of accessibility, certainly all the points are taken and we will take them on board. Bank accounts, the issue of bank accounts is a huge issue in terms of financial inclusion, and financial inclusion should not stop at the category of the poor and unbanked. It must include accessibility of persons who are living with disabilities and accordingly need different consideration. So whether it's Braille or voice-activated software, whether whatever the mechanism is, we certainly will take back to Cabinet the need to encourage that while we talk with the banks about the KYC requirements and how we ensure that we can have more people banked in Jamaica, without the hurdles that are that much more difficult given our limitations in terms of national identification and otherwise, that we will raise the issue as a key one, that as they seek to change processes on the inclusion side, that it also consider the differently abled. So thank you for having made your advocacy clear this morning, Senator Morris. The words have not fallen on ears which cannot hear. Mr. President, well, I can't sign all of that, but I'm signing my ear hug to you. Just no, well, you know, I take the love where I find it, and I will store it up for the next 3 sittings or so when I may probably need it again. But, Mr. President, in the spirit of cooperation and unity, which is demonstrated here today by our agreement on the resolutions to continue the 4 states of emergency which had been declared, Mr. President, I ask that this Honourable Senate approve the motions which have been placed before us. I thank you.
Thank you very much to all members of the Senate who participated in this debate today. We are required to take the 4 resolutions, and they have to be taken individually and on an individual vote. So the first resolution, the Emergency Powers 2019 Continuance number 2, Resolution 2020 under the Emergency Powers Act, I put. Please pay attention to the clerk.
Senator Graham,
Yes.
Senator Brown,
Yes.
Senator Crawford. Not here. Pardon?
No, not you. Go ahead.
Senator Fraser Binns. Senator Gale. Senator Horton. Senator Hill. Senator Johnson Smith. Senator Knight. Senator Longmore. Senator Morgan.
Yes.
Senator Morris. Senator Morrison. Senator Samuda.
Yes.
Senator Scott Motley. Yes.
Yes, I was distracted.
Senator Sinclair. Senator Skeffrey.
Yes.
Senator Webby.
Yes.
Senator Williams. Mr. President.
Yes. In relation to Resolution 1, I do report as follows. 18 ayes, no noes, no declines, 2 persons absent. So the ayes have it. Regulation number 2, the Emergency Powers number 2, 2019, Continuance number 2, Resolution 2020 under the Emergency Powers Act. Madam Clerk, take the roll.
Senator Briam.
Yes.
Senator Brown.
Yes.
Senator Crawford. Senator Fraser Binns. Senator Gale. Senator Horton. Senator Hill. Senator Johnson Smith. Senator Knight. Senator Longmore.
Yes.
Senator Morgan.
Yes.
Senator Morris. Senator Morrison. Senator Samuda. Senator Scott Motley. Senator Sinclair. Senator Skeffrey. Senator Webby. Senator Williams. Mr. President.
Yes. I do report in relation to resolution number 2 as follows. 18 ayes, no declines to vote, no noes, 2 absents. So the resolution is carried. Resolution number 3, the Emergency Powers number 3, 2019 Continuance number 2, Resolution 2020 under the Emergency Powers Act. Madam Clerk.
Senator Briam.
Yes.
Senator Brown.
Yes.
Senator Crawford. Senator Fraser Binns. Senator Gale. Senator Horton. Senator Hill. Senator Johnson Smith. Senator Knight. Senator Longmore. Senator Morgan.
Yes.
Senator Morris. Senator Morrison. Senator Samuda. Senator Scott Motley. Senator Sinclair. Senator Skeffrey. Senator Webby. Senator Williams. Mr. President.
Yes. I do report resolution number 3 as having passed. 18 ayes, no noes, no abstention, 2 absent. Resolution number 4, the Emergency Powers Continuance number 2, Resolution 2020 under the Emergency Powers Act. Madam Clerk.
Senator Briam.
Yes.
Senator Brown.
Yes.
Senator Crawford. Senator Crawford. Yes. Senator Crawford. Senator Fraser Binns. Senator Gale. Senator Horton. Senator Hill.
Yes.
Senator Johnson Smith. Senator Knight. Senator Longmore.
Yes.
Senator Morgan.
Yes.
Senator Morris. Senator Morrison. Senator Samuda.
Yes.
Senator Scott Motley.
Yes.
Senator Sinclair. Senator Skeffrey. Senator Webby.
Yes.
Senator Williams. Mr. President.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Clerk. I do report the Emergency Powers continuance number 4 resolution 2020 under the Emergency Powers Act having passed with 18 ayes, no noes, no abstention, 2 members absent.
Mr. President. Mr. President, I wish to ask for recommittal of 3 items. I wish to ask for the recommittal of announcements, reports from committees, and notices of motion given orally to allow Senator Scott Motley to present on the matter which you spoke of earlier.
The members have heard the request. Those in favor? Against? Announcements.
Also laid on the table of the House today is a special report of the Standing Orders Committee of the Senate regarding arrangements for virtual sittings during periods of national emergency.
Reports from committees.
Mr. President, I beg to lay on the table of the Senate a copy of the special report of the Senate Standing Orders Committee regarding arrangements for virtual sittings during periods of national emergency.
Thank you, Senator Scott Motley. Notices of motions given orally.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the following motion. Be it resolved that recommendations made in the special report of the Senate Standing Orders Committee regarding arrangements for virtual sittings during periods of national emergency, which was laid on the table of the House on the 24th day of April 2020, be affirmed. I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion.
Thank you very much. Public business. Senator Scott Motley.
Mr. President, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
Those in favor? Against?
Mr. President, this motion was actually resulted from deliberations as we sought to enable those who could not be present here because of certain rules and regulations to still be able to participate in the sittings of the Standing Committee. It was felt that the Senate should lead by example and should allow for continuity in the work of Parliament by means of exemptions of its members and staff. But notwithstanding the exemptions, it was desirable to remove any risk associated with conventional meetings while encouraging compliance with the restrictions amongst the population. The Senate Standing Committee therefore took the view that committees of the Senate ought to be empowered to conduct their business during using the available technology. And Mr. President, as we have been discussing in that committee, there will be moments other than this one in which that might become necessary. So I invite, if there are members who want to make a contribution on this matter, Mr. President, I would ask you to invite them so to do now.
Well, the committee has made its recommendation, unless anybody has anything.
President, I concur with the thing, but I have some concern. Zoom, for example, have had some security issues in the past, and I'd urge the committee in looking at how we empower such a meeting to have regard for that risk. So it's not just the conventional meetings that have risk, have that gathering, but the Zoom may have some cyber security issues. Secondly, I know from watching the debate in the other place that they have had some controversy, not unsolvable, but while they will approve their committees like PAC and etc., and we approve our committees here, when there's joint select committee, we don't need to be able to get an approval from both places to allow for the joint select committees to meet similarly. And I give support to the resolution.
As the chairman of the committee, I can respond to you. The question of security we had looked into carefully. The meetings are, sorry, perhaps you should deal with it, Senator.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. President.
Senator Morris?
You know, oftentimes when we discuss these issues in the Senate, I have to make my piece about the inclusivity of persons with disabilities and the use of the technology. And I want to strongly endorse the recommendation of the committee, because the technology that have been utilized and the technologies that have been recommended to us have been fully accessible to me and inclusive for me as a member with a disability. And it poses absolutely no risk in terms of my inclusion. And I wholeheartedly want to support the resolution, because once there is inclusivity, then I am comfortable and I am in full support. May it please you.
1 minute, Senator.
Mr. President,
To declare yourself that you're a member of the committee, by the way.
that's what I'm going to do, if you will allow me, sir. And thank you very much. Mr. President, being a member of the committee, yesterday we virtually went through testing that meeting, and it was done efficiently. In fact, it may have been the only meeting that started promptly on time. And we all navigated through that particular meeting, irrespective of where we were. And the good thing about it is that the meeting I found to have been a very successful one. And this is one of the things that, you know, there's a saying sometimes when you're going through a crisis, to exploit the crisis. And this is one of those positive exploits, because what it dictates and determines, Mr. President, is that if and when the nation's parliament comes up against any challenge, the diversity in approach will help us to navigate around those challenges. And you know, I am not going to comment on that. I'm not going to comment on something that I don't believe in. But what it does, Chair, it makes a very strong recommendation in terms of continuing the work of the Parliament, because there are a number of committee meetings that have been suspended, especially those who require external support outside of the Parliament in order to conduct its work. So I believe, if we can say, it's a very effective motion that has been put forward. And certainly I find very strong favor with it. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I think that thank you, Senator Gill. Senator Sinclair wants to say something, but it's 1:20. So can I have a motion, please?
Mr. President, the time being 1:20, might the Senate be permitted to sit beyond 1:30 to complete the business of the meeting?
Thank you very much. You have heard the motion. Those in favor? Senator Sinclair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President. And I myself, being a member of the Standing Orders Committee that looked at this particular issue, and just looking down the list of names of the members of the committee, I think I traveled the furthest to be here. And you know, coming from Western Jamaica, it has always been commented on to say that sometimes we feel left out because of the challenges in respect to traveling into Kingston to attend meetings of various boards, and in particular the Parliament. And I do find it, and I tried the process yesterday. In fact, I observed my very young son doing the Zoom for his classes through the school system. And I had to watch him for the period of days between Monday leading up to Thursday to ensure that I was prepared to participate in the process. But I felt that I was a part of the process, although I was so far away, seated in Montego Bay and participating in the Standing Orders Committee. So I do believe that it is a good direction in which we are moving, and that we will be able to ensure that this type of system works in the widest way and come with the best results for the people of Jamaica. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I want to thank all the members for their support for the motion. I want to address a concern raised by Senator Brown because, of course, the Standing Orders Committee was concerned with it. In fact, there was an incident which was raised, which had taken place in another place other than here, and it seemed as though somebody had indiscriminately given out the password. I think that might have created some problems. We are aware of the reports of Zoom being bombed with all sorts of things, but I can assure the team that insofar as it is possible, all caution, every possible approach will be taken to ensure that does not take place in our committee meetings. I also want to say that another concern which was raised was the fact that, you know, other persons have access from a security point of view. But the Standing Orders Committee is public. So we share whatever we do with the public. And in fact, we invite the public to join us so that they can understand what it is that we are deliberating on. I must single out Senator Charles Sinclair, because when you look at the records, in spite of the distance which he has to travel, he has attended every meeting. And I think that is commendable. I want to say that Senator K.D. Knight was also able to join us, as he has some reservations about being here, and they are all quite understandable. So that I think, President, that we had a very good committee meeting, ably led by you as usual, and that the participation of all the members was considerable. It was thoughtful, and if this is an indication of how we will proceed by virtual meetings, I would say it definitely is a good sign going forward. And I ask that the members approve this motion, if it pleases you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you very much. And thank you not only to the members of the committee. Before I put it, thanks not only to the members of the committee, but the members of staff who supported the committee. Yes, and of course, members of the staff who committed, who facilitated the meeting this morning, and a special recognition to Mervick Brown, our PR person who, I'm sorry, our IT person. You write PR, you know. It's PR, you write, you know. Our IT, I'm just teasing you. Our IT person who went out of his way to insist that we got through some of our challenges. That's Mervick Brown. And of course to the person who drafted the resolution this morning in short order. Yes, Ms. Golden, who drafted the resolution, and Ms. Cohen, yes, that's what I said, who drafted the resolution and the report in short order this morning. So I put the resolution contained in the report. Those in favor? Against? Minister?
Thank you, Mr. President. And Mr. President, as we have had such a fantastic day, it's a challenging time, and the issues that we've had to deal with are not easy ones, and they're not pleasant ones necessarily. But there is just a small point which I wish to raise as we proceed to the adjournment, and this is the fact that just 2 days ago, it was announced by Reporters Without Borders that Jamaica has again risen 2 points on the Press Freedom Index, on the Global Press Freedom Index. And this is just an extremely positive recognition that the world pays to Jamaica. Senator Brown, please, let us not break the stride. So we were in 2018, we were at 6. In 2019, 2 countries passed us out, Denmark and New Zealand, if I recall correctly, and we were then 8th, and we're now back at 6th. And I think that we should commend the government on the work that has been done, and commend our press for the strength which they display. I feel confident that all the work that has been undertaken in sharing information during this pandemic will continue to demonstrate the commitment that Jamaican administration has to the sharing of information and to a strong and free press. So, Mr. President, I want to commend the members of media, civil society, the people of Jamaica and government for the work that has been done that has resulted again in our rising on the Global Media Freedom Index. Again, one positive in a year of significant challenges. I thank you, Mr. President, and ask that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed, as it is not intended to do any further business today.
Thank you very much, Madam. The question is that the Senate be adjourned to a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Against? This Honourable Senate now stands adjourned.